So we're now going to the last keynote speech before the first pitching session. So I'd like to remind 5 companies to be here in 20 minutes. These companies are Kaznache, Public Fast, Controlin, Shopian, and Wishround. Please be here in 20 minutes as we will have the first pitching session. The guest speaker we have now is Yuriy Zaytsev, Business Development Director at Microsoft. He's going to talk about software as a service business model and Matrix. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Vittorio. So what I'm going to talk about today are a couple of things related to business side of creating a startup. How to make money, some of the best practices, some of the ideas we have noticed by working with the successful startups. But before that, do you know what that number is? That's actually the percentage of entrepreneurs who had an idea, who get financing, and who get to the point of creating their own company. These are startups. And the 98%, these are just entrepreneurs. They never get the business. They never get to actually start making serious money out of the idea they have created. So, what do you want to be? Do you want to be in the 2%? Or do you want to be in the 98%? Let's look at what are the factors, what determines where you end up in creating a company, making money, creating a business, or just having a nice idea and doing some hobby out of it. Generally, there are 3 factors, or the major ones, which determine whether you go one direction or another. That's first part of financing and money. How do you finance a startup, whether it's bootstrap, seed, venture capital, investment rounds? How do you exit? Do you sell your company? Do you go for an IPO? Do you go public in the Western markets? So everything related to money in, money out. Then the second part, and that's what I'm going to focus today, is a business model. How do you get money out of your customers? How do you price your product? How do you market your product? What is basically, how do you build your business, and what is the way to monetize your idea? And then finally, the product. What exactly are you trying to sell? Is it the nice product? Is it the wrong one? But today, I'll focus just on the business model. I'll do a very quick, I need to do it, but I'll spend maybe 2 minutes on the overview, software as a service, then look at some of the examples and the best practice about pricing. So what are the examples, potential options, how do you price your product? Then touch on sales and marketing and measurement. So let's dig into it. That's a slide which is typically redundant because I don't think that anybody of you is actually trying to sell what you do as a product. You don't sell licenses, I don't think so. That's a typical old world. We sell software, it gets deployed at each customer has its own version. That's not very nice at the internet scale. So what is a better option, software as a service? You have multiple customers using same version of the software, provided sitting on your data center on the cloud at a hosting provider, but the most important one, they're all using the same version, they're all using the same features, they're all on a constantly upgrades, and they're all on the same code base essentially for you. Typically, that's also multi-tenant because that's more efficient simply. And you can get the benefits of scale and scope if you go multi-tenant. What are the key activities in this kind of business? Well, that's actually interesting. Marketing and sales. And notice that I put it not sales and marketing, how typically you do it, but marketing and sales. Because in a SaaS world, you want to attract people. So this is more inbound. You want to get people want to get and use your service, and only then you sell them. Support. Why support? Because in a SaaS, in a service world, people first use the product and then they pay for it. So if they're not very satisfied with what they use, and that is to a large extent determined also by how you support them, they don't buy and they don't pay. DevOps and operations. Because you maintain the same code base for all of the customers and the upgrades essentially are live, you have to be very strict about how do you deploy when and at which stage. I'm actually mentoring right now a startup in the manufacturing automation space, and for them that was actually one of the key issues, setting the DevOps procedures. How do I make sure that the upgrades are tested and can I roll them back quickly in case of any problems? I can fix the bugs and get the customers running while I'm working on the code. That's all part of the DevOps and operations. And that's actually the part where many startups overlooking the initial stages because this is not necessary in the beginning. And then finally, something which I hope all of you are familiar with and are following, the agile development practices. Sprints, quick iterations, you get the features iteratively, you don't wait for the big release. These activities actually drive how do you choose the platform on which you base your solution, which you base your service. It has to fit your business model and strategy. Is the pricing of the platform right? Does it give you the geographical coverage? If you're willing to go to North America as a first market to US, then ideally you would like to have data centers available in North America. If you want to go worldwide, ideally you want to spread across the globe so that the customers are accessing your solution with latency and bandwidth appropriate for the region where they live. Application architecture. Is your architecture built, does the platform support what you actually need from it? Quick deployment, quick development, iterative deployments, fault tolerance, being able to quickly use the functionality of the platform instead of coding everything on it on your own. And then finally, operations. Does the platform support the full operational lifecycle? Is it easy to do? Can you do quickly, deploy to stage, switch to production, switch back if it doesn't work? That's some of the key functionalities you want to do. And of course, support and DevOps. Does it integrate with the tools you're using? Or do you need to spend a lot of time and effort on doing things which you probably wouldn't like to do otherwise? And then going back, I mentioned that marketing and sales is the #1 step. So what do you do as a SaaS, as a software as a service startup? You get your customers, you keep them, and then you get the money out of them. And ideally, this is in this order. So first you get the customer to use your product, you make sure they don't leave immediately, and then it becomes much easier to get them to pay for you because they get accustomed to using what you provide. And then how actually can you make money? There are a couple of options. There are a multitude of different business models. I'll only touch on a couple of them. Because business model actually is what, as a software as a service startup, is what you do. You search for the right business model. How do you make money off your idea? What typically customers want from a service? They want something which is simple and easy. If you remember how Salesforce.com has started, it was simple service, way simpler than a traditional CRM software, and it was easy to use. Critical examples. They're ready to pay, but they're ready to pay moderate amounts. This is not huge contract payment upfront like in a traditional world. That's all gone. They often want subscription. Same idea, no upfront commitment. I pay as long as I use. That's a subscription business. And then, of course, they often expect that if it's a service, you maintain it. So it doesn't run on their premises. You keep everything going. It runs in a cloud data center. How do you monetize in this environment? There are a multitude of options. You can do the freemium model. You can do price per usage. You can do price per units of measurement, price per transaction. You can do advertising funded. There are all of the different sorts of options. Which one is most appropriate? As I mentioned, that's up to you to decide. That's basically what the idea of a software as a service startup is. What is the business model which is good for you? The one which is actually very common today is a freemium one. So you give away a product for free, and then you charge for the premium features. Good example, Skype. It's free for use for the basic, but if you want to use a Skype out, so calling to the normal phones, you pay for it. And it also has the key ingredients of a good freemium product. It's appeal. The basic one is has appeal to a large number of users. Skype is pretty good for a very large number of customers, so it's very useful. People use it for free. It can be delivered electronically, so you don't pay essentially. The marginal cost of incremental customer is next to zero because it's all digital. And then the premium features are actually valuable, so you don't give 90% of the value in a free product. You keep something which is very valuable for the premium one, and that's when people start to pay. If you don't satisfy these features, then the freemium model, however good it is, it's probably not right for you. So if your basic product is not appealing to the large number of users on its own, they're not going to go to you right away. If you cannot differentiate free and premium, they will go and sign up and use it, but it'll be very difficult to get them to pay. So you have to be very attentive. If you use freemium model, what exactly do you go? And that's where we get to the question, how do you price the product? First of all, pricing should drive behavior. Do you want people to quickly sign up and start using your basic functionality? Means price it cheap or price it free. So that they get on the service, they get accustomed to it. Do you rather prefer to get a larger upfront payment and then get customers to basically give them the bulk of functionality and then get the incremental updates later? Then price in a bundle. The first level is up to 50 users, and then you incrementally end up. Do you want customers mostly use your basic service for a small fee, but then you have a something very valuable which costs a lot of money? That's great, because then you can differentiate free and simple, and then expensive for those who really need it. Pricing drives behavior. It also defines value. The price of your product, of your service, should be related to the value it provides. And if I use the analogy from the manufacturing, from a traditional hardware space, it's cost-based pricing. So you don't price your product based on how much it costs you to operate, to maintain the system, how much investment you have made. You actually try to fit your expenses and your costs into the pricing level you expect your customers will be able to pay. It's a very different model. You start with what the value, price signals the value, and then you try to make your money, the business work with this price. And then simple and transparent, that's actually one of the key things. If a customer doesn't understand what they pay for, or how they pay for, or how much, they go elsewhere. So you have to be very simple and transparent. By the way, you can be very simple and transparent for the basic level. It doesn't mean that the advanced functionality cannot be complex, because you still get the people to use your service. If they want, they'll find out, but the first thing, they have to start using. Some of the best pricing tips, and again, this is based on the examples and what we have seen from Microsoft Ventures startups, the startups which went to the Microsoft Ventures accelerators, and just from what we observe on the market. First, who is your customer and what are the personas? What are the profiles of your users? And typically in a software as a service business, anything you sell as a service, this is not a marketing afterthought, that's a foundation. If you treat this as a marketing, typically you'll be up for a pretty expensive surprise a little bit later. So that should be the foundation, the starting point of how you design what you want to sell. Select, test, and change. You're starting on the market, you have first customers, that's an opportunity to try a couple of things. So you design that this should be my pricing, this should be my business model. You test it. Does it live up to the expectations? No. Okay, go to something else. Again, I use the example of a startup I'm working with. Initially, they priced the whole system as a monolithic block. So you pay by the usage, by the number of users. But then they realized that actually their customers want two different parts of the system, and they split it. They have a very simple attendance tracking, who goes on the manufacturing line, what do they do, and do it quickly. So that's a very simple system, sold at a very low price, large number of users. And the second module is a full-blown automation, full-blown tracking, product quality control, and so on and so forth. So that's an experiment. Tried one, didn't work as they expected, changed the pricing. Yes, it might cause some issues with existing customers, but you better manage it in the beginning so that by the time you get to the scale, you get your pricing absolutely right, because then it will be much difficult to change. Easy consumption. I think it's pretty obvious. If it's difficult to buy, people will not buy. Priced based on value, that's what I mentioned. If you set the price too low, you send the signal, I am cheap, I do not bring you a lot of value. I don't value my product, why should you? It's a very powerful message actually to send. It's very difficult to reverse. It's easy to lower price, it's next to impossible to raise it. Well, unless they're Oracle, of course, and charge for support. Breakout functionality. That's another one. And that's the example I was talking about, the startup I work with. It's a typical. You have a functionality which is usable by a large number of people. Great. But then you have a couple of advanced features which are very valuable, but to a small customer base. Don't bundle, split it out. You can even make a totally different pricing. You can make per-usage pricing for the basic level, low price, easy to collect, easy to pay, and you can make a pretty complicated and sophisticated custom pricing for the advanced functionality. That's basically the power you have. You divide what you charge and how. And again, think about it. Large number of users, keep at the base level. Small number of users who use it, you can charge more, but you have to split it out. And then hybrid model, it can actually work very well. Probably a very good example would be freemium and advertising funded. You get a free product, but it's funded by the advertising. You don't want to, the customer doesn't want to see ads, they pay. So you combine the two models, the user gets the benefit, they can use your product for free, but then they neg with advertising, or they can start paying, you get the money anyway, and the user chooses how he wants to basically use the product. The advertising funded plus premium features plus freemium, that's actually pretty common right now, more and more. Sales. In a typical world, on premises, first you sell something with expensive sales force, commissions, channel margins, so on and so forth. So you go door to door, you do telemarketing, you advertise. You convince the customer to buy, and then they paid the money, so they have actually some incentive. They say, okay, I paid, I need to jump. Then they start using it. In a service world, it's totally different. First, people start using what you give them, and if they're happy with it, they pay for it. So they pay for it because they use it. They don't use it because they pay for it. That's a totally different equation. And what it means that you have to compare to the traditional model, it's a totally different way of organizing sales. And these are the questions you might want to ask yourself. Can my customers easily find me? Am I discoverable? Is it easy to get to my site? Is it easy to understand what is the product? What I'm trying to sell you? Is it easy for the customer to get an idea and confirm, okay, the offering looks applicable to me. The next step is basically same. You don't want to qualify them. You want people to self-qualify. Typical examples, we're going to help you select what functionality, what model, or what edition of my service do I need. Ask and please answer these couple of simple questions. That's self-qualification online. So instead of like telesales person calling the customer and trying to sell them something, you tell them, okay, answer these questions and we recommend you what you can use. Easy self-qualification. Can they try? Typically in a service, that's a major one. You want them to try. Because if they like it, they'll come back and they pay. So you want to make a trial, very easy. Either freemium, limited time, limited functionality, different options. And then finally, once they love it, is it easy to convert to the paying customer? If it's as easy as pressing one button, upgrade to paid, then you have a conversion rate which will be much higher than if the customer has to go for a 10-step process. Each step adds dropouts. Each step loses you potential money. And now we come to the point, when you run the SaaS business, it's absolutely critical that you measure it. Because Lord Kelvin said a long time ago, if you cannot measure it, you cannot improve it. So you would not know how your business runs. Let's take a very simple example. You're selling something online, e-commerce. You're selling something which might necessarily be a good, so e-commerce in a broader sense. Basically, your main channel, online selling. You get visitors. Typically, 20, 25, 30%, that depends, but on average that's about this, would go actually to registration. So you start with, how do you measure visitors? Unique visitors, bounce rates, people who leave your site immediately, and then campaign statistics. People who get to the registration, how many have completed sign-ups? How many have abandoned it? If too many abandoned, it means something is wrong with your process, you need to adjust it. How many actually just leave? So they complete the registration, but they never show up. And then same statistics, but in the context of a particular campaign. Now they convert, they started paying. From registration to subscription, typically that's 2 to 3%. Again, it depends a lot, but on average, software as a service business for the SMB customers, 2-3%. How do you track what you do? What are your customer acquisition costs? What is your committed monthly revenue? So how much they pay per month? If you're a gaming company, online gaming, you would be very interested, what is your daily average users, monthly active users? And then all of this translates into one big measure, how much cash do you have and how much cash do you spend? And then reorder rates, upsell rates, that all starts playing into the equation. So you can track a lot, and you should track a lot. But keep in mind that in a typical online e-commerce business, visitors, only 1% of them will end up paying you. And 1% actually is good. So you need to know exactly if you get them, where you lose them, and how to improve. Easy best practices. That's actually pretty common. Anyone who is doing anything on e-commerce will give you exactly the same. The less steps, the better. Each single step in any process online increases the dropout rates by a factor of 2 or 3. Start with a benchmark. Look at Amazon, for example. Look at their checkout process. It has been honed based on years and multiple millions of customer processes. So you can be sure that it's pretty refined. You can start with something which you know works and take it as a base on which you base your own setup. Test. Test and track. Do A/B testing. Test one approach, test different approach. Give half of the customers one side, half of the customers different side. Compare which works better. You might find interesting surprises. We ran an advertising campaign recently. We tested just the color of the background for the ad. Red or green makes about 40% difference in the click-through rates. So you might discover the same. What are the bottlenecks? Where people leave? And track, track, and track. And then finally, simpler is better. Find out what metrics do you want to track and look at them regularly. This is a typical dashboard of a software as a service company. That's actually taken from a real-life example recently, which is now in a Tel Aviv accelerator. They choose a few metrics, and they look at them every day. They look at the trends, and then they know whether it's going up or down, where they need to improve. So I hope this short introduction was useful. You pick up some of the good ideas. And I need to do a small commercial pitch, because I'm from Microsoft. So I want to show what Microsoft can do to help you build this kind of software as a service business. We provide first with the BizSpark. That's a program for all of the startups giving access to software, some of the additional services, technology, and support. If you want to learn more, please come to our stand. And as we progress, we have partners whom we work with, partner accelerators, organizations who do hackathons, like Startup Weekend, like Garage 48 in Estonia, like 11 and Launch Hub, Accelerators Investor Fund in Bulgaria, and a couple of more. We have our own accelerators, 7 of them across the world. We don't have one in Eastern Europe yet. We actually have one in partnership in Russia, which is opened about a month ago, free. Closest one in Tel Aviv, in Berlin, in London, in France, in Paris. And then finally, we do invest as a company. We have a corporate investment arm. We do invest in certain startups. And some of them end up as acquisitions. Like, for example, recently, Microsoft acquired a software as a service company called Captain, who does application analytics. And this is this functionality which is now going into part of the Azure platform. So with that, thank you very much. I hope you come up to our stand to explore a little bit more, and I'm here if you have any questions.